If we say, no, solutions have to be born and bred, in maritime. So it should be like a sailor that one day decides to do AI, and then you have your maritime inbred startup. Yeah, that would be lovely to see, but it's not the whole story. It's not going to move as fast as it could with that particular model. So cross-fertilization and collaboration for me are key.
That's the voice of Maurizio Pilu, today's guest on the podcast. We find out how his accelerator was born from an internal program at Lloyd's Register. And what is probably the most interesting thing is an in-depth look at the major barriers to digital transformation in our space. Of course, don't forget to follow. That's the plus button on the top of the podcast. This will allow you to be notified when new episodes are dropped. Of course, if you like what you hear, add a 5-star review and a few nice words. And please tell your friends about the podcast. The more listeners, the better. Thanks for listening to the podcast, and now on to the show. Welcome, everyone, and you are listening to The Last Dinosaur, and I'm your host, Chris Aversano. On today's podcast, we have Maurizio Pilu, PhD, founder and managing director of Safetytech Accelerator. Maurizio is a technology leader, an executive with a wealth of experience in data and digital roles spanning science, R&D, strategy, innovation, corporate development, market and business development, and technology commercialization. Safetytech Accelerator is a nonprofit established by Lloyd's Register. It's the first fully dedicated technology accelerator focused on safety and risk in industrial sectors. Their mission is to make the world safer and more sustainable through wider adoption of safety tech. Maurizio, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
Let's just talk about safety tech, what it does, how it was formed, a little bit about the ultimate goal. I'm really curious to hear about kind of the place here, especially in our shipping industry. We've seen a lot of these accelerators. Tell me a little bit about what you have going on here with this.
Thank you. Perhaps I'll start with a few words about myself first, just to set it in context how we got to this point. So I'm not a maritime person. I'm a digital technologist and executive. So I come from the digital world, if you like. I've been in tech for 30 years now, and I started as an engineer, then went on to do a PhD, worked in corporate research, venture capital, also in the UK government to design strategies, national, international strategies. I've done 50 patents, 30, 40 scientific publications, and I raised 100 million for various initiatives that I promoted and shaped and then led. So a bunch of things I've done. About 7 years ago, I joined Lloyd's Register, and my brief was to essentially help set up the first ever digital innovation practice for this 260-year-old, very venerable and quite famous company in Maritime. When I was approached by a recruitment agency, I said, Lloyd's what? I didn't know, to be honest. But then when I heard about the brief, this first ever digital innovation practice and the complexity of the sectors plural, because at the time Lloyd's Register had food, certification, energy, and obviously maritime. Anyway, I said, that sounds like a big professional challenge. Yeah, I'll take it. So I thought it was a great way to contribute and also start something new as well, in terms of starting from scratch, blank piece of paper, really something that I really like. As we started to do the innovation practice, the usual things, pilots and so forth, we started to work with early stage technology companies. So I'm starting to get to the point where we have this idea of setting up an accelerator, right? Like anyone starting to work with tech companies, I'm not saying myself, I've done it for 20 years, but the company as a whole is something quite new, right? And so we realized a couple of things in starting to work with early stage tech company. First, it's really hard to do. We have a very traditional company working in a traditional sectors, double whammy kind of thing. And then you have these agile entrepreneurs that want to move fast and so on, clash of cultures kind of thing. And so we discovered that we needed really a repeatable, standardized process to engage startups, something that would be also attractive to them, and so on. So one thing that we realized was we needed structure. Doing it ad hoc was really not right. The second thing we realized is that we kind of started to spot a gap in the market for open innovation, for innovation around safety and risk, right? Compare with topics such as efficiency and competitiveness and so forth. Safety and risk kind of the if you like the not the highest priority, let me put this way, for innovation and entrepreneurship. So we spotted this gap, clearly an important topic, right? But then we realized not much was being done about in terms of entrepreneurship and startups. So we said, well, look, we need a bit more structure for working with startups. Then there is this new topic. Well, the two came together and said, maybe we set up something, a new accelerator focused on safety and risk for industrial sectors. It was a world's first. And when we set it up, it was an internal program, and it was doing, essentially getting clients with big problems together with entrepreneurs. And the objective was to understand the requirements of the problem and so on, but ultimately it's to really do pilots, really to work together. So having the technology company being piloted with the client's asset, whatever problem we were trying to solve. We, in about 18 months since we started, we did 20 open innovation challenges with as many clients. Very, very successful. Many startups participated in various challenges, 200-300 startups and so on. And we even won a major international award with Lloyd's List, the Disruptive Innovation Award. So 18 fantastic months. So essentially we spotted a gap in the market where we could contribute a lot. Now the mission shouldn't be a surprise. The mission of Lloyd's Register is to protect property and life on land and seas. So working in safety and risk was a natural thing for the company to do. But we realized that we were first, basically, on the block with an accelerator focused on this particular topic, and we really enjoyed it. So this was an internal program. After 18 months, COVID hit, right? Boom, the world stops. Right? You remember that?
Yeah, everything kind of stops. But just going back to that, what's kind of interesting is that you're right. The accelerator in focusing on safety and risk. Yeah, people want it's less, for a lack of a better term, less sexy to a lot of people, right?
It is. It's what it is, right? But there is a gap. Somebody needs to do it. And
as I'm listening to it, I'm taking some notes and I'm thinking, I mean, this is very interesting that we recognize this gap and kind of moving forward. So what happened after COVID?
So basically, during COVID, the reality is the following, startups couldn't travel anymore to do pitches and events, the workshops we were doing with clients to shape a challenge, and all our process was based on quite a lot of physical presence, but also remote. But, before COVID, it was like natural to just do something physical. You travel and you do stuff, you do events. But most importantly, clients were preoccupied with keeping the lights on. Essentially, that first 6 months, it was really not one for, if you like, talking about innovation and so on. It was more like lights on and
survival. Yeah, and then it was a lot of, I think Rumso, not to say I'm a fan, but he quoted all these unknowns, right? I mean, you had too many unknowns. You wake up every day and it's either going to wipe out humanity or we're a couple of weeks away from having a cure. So
totally. But to cut a long story short, essentially we had time to think, right? Very good, very positive. So we said, this is really working. Clients are really interested. We really think we can deliver impact on an underserved part of the market here, underserved from an open innovation and entrepreneur's perspective. So we decided to carve it out. We decided to carve it out from an internal program into essentially a non-profit autonomous business, okay? Essentially almost like a spin out, right? And start really growing it, grow the program, the breadth of what we do, the depth of what we do, and so forth. A beautiful case of a company trying to, you land on something interesting and you say, okay, let's make it grow, right? Adjacent and outside of the company, but highly connected, of course, to the parent. So basically, since January 2021, Safetytech Accelerator Limited was born, and I'm the managing director and founder of the organization, and we've been operating as a non-profit since then, okay? Now, going back to what we are doing, 2 years on, we are very busy. We are growing our projects that we are doing with clients, our presence there, therefore the impact we can deliver, and so forth. We are working at the moment with over 20 maritime clients, so we're a bit of a hub for innovation for global maritime clients. They're coming to us with very difficult problems to solve. Topics such as cargo fire and loss, reducing methane losses in engines, crew welfare, robotics. So a bunch of difficult topics that we are working with clients and startups to resolve. But if we take a step back, going back to your point, what are you trying to do really? Well, our mission is to make the world safer, more sustainable, more resilient through the adoption of technology, right? So if we take a step back from the day-to-day, what we are doing is really creating proof points, examples, and thought leadership. So we believe we are agents of change, working with many people, many stakeholders, agents of change in terms of adoption of technologies. And we do that through rolling our sleeves up. So we do something very practical. We do pilots. We try to really solve challenges and so forth, and promoting them widely in the community.
One of the things that I always, I kind of tongue in cheek, the name of this podcast is, of course, The Last Dinosaur, because we're so slow to adapt this. Is this still a hurdle? I kind of joked around earlier about that, safety and cargo safety, safety of life, all those things, which, I was a merchant mariner. It's the number one thing, right, that you have. Yet technology seems to be a little bit behind even for that. Do you still find that there is a hurdle in this? Kind of you've identified the gap, and I think I said earlier, it was wonderful that you did, because clearly everybody wanted the cool stuff, making money on cargo trades or whatever. Do you still find that there's a hurdle for this digital transformation, taking, roles that, let's say, take a lot of people, effort, and energy, still have a gap in safety sometimes, and kind of digitize it? Are you still seeing that hurdle, or have the barriers, are they slowly going down?
What we are doing is essentially a form of digitization. Actually,
Right.
if you really look at safety critical industries like maritime, so many challenges that might not sound like safety and risk are actually also, they boil down to safety and risk one way or another. If you think about efficiencies in ports, you might say, well, it's only about money, right? But actually, a huge amount of accidents happen near shore because of waiting, because of inefficiencies, because of the rush and the pressure, and so forth. So things that improve efficiency actually also reduce risk, and that's what we are finding. But going back to the barriers, Chris, first of all, I rarely see barriers as a negative thing. It's just a feature. It's a feature. Now, if you really think about it, I'm not sure I want to live in a world where there are no barriers to digital adoption, to be honest, because imagine a scenario where, anything gets tried and adopted, it's probably a recipe for very unsafe, chaotic operations, right? But also, if there are no barriers, it means that the technology is not making enough progress, because barriers only happen when the technology is ahead of what a sector can absorb. That's what barriers are, really. So barriers means that technology is progressing. There's a lot of possibilities, and the industry is catching up with those. But one of the things that I've learned from working in many sectors, that once digitization catches on, it's impossible to stop it in a sector, simply because it flips from being a nice to have to a must have. So there is a tipping point, after which, if you don't have something, you're simply not competitive. And it's beautiful to see those tipping points kind of happening before our eyes, right? So I see these barriers as just part of a journey, really, of adoption, not in a negative way as sometimes they're portrayed, right? But going back to the various challenges, there are several, and I might want to expand a little bit on a couple, because some interesting stories that, like war stories of things that we are learning through working in the field. For me, the major barriers on anything digitization is the status quo. Anyone trying to sell in this particular sector, we just got particular requirements. Also very proud, that's the way we do things for 200 years,
Yeah, I mean, just as a side thing, I read a book years ago about Marco Polo, and they were talking about charter parties.
Okay, that's
I mean, it's like, yeah, we've been doing it now. Granted, there are probably more clauses,
and it's still on
but think
paper.
about it, right? They were talking about the agreement between the ship owner and the cargo owner. And
That's
this is a book about Marco Polo. Like,
it's
out of
amazing.
five,
I think I might ask you offline the title there.
I don't do that, Maurizio, because I can't remember it. It was a book at my parents' house, and I read it. I brought it on a vacation. I gave back to her. I got to ask my mom one day.
I'll Google it. I'll Google it.
But it was to your point, right? I mean, we've been doing this for 500 years.
And obviously with my job, I deal with a lot of entrepreneurs that go there quite naively into the sector, not thinking that the status quo is a powerful thing to unseat, basically. And I like to give an example of predictive analytics for pumps on ships, right? You might think, well, of course, yeah. I mean, these things are off the shelf now. You can buy predictive analytics sensors. You can put them, magnetically on a pump and it's tell you when it's breaking. But actually, if you ask quite a lot of people, say, well, those that are non-critical, we just let them run to ground. When they break, we replace them. Why should we spend money on something that can be replaced? When it breaks, you replace it. It's like, something breaks on your car, you fix it, right? You don't do a huge amount of preventive maintenance in a car. And so if you're an entrepreneur, other sectors, maybe they are investing a lot in predictive maintenance of pumps. Like if you're in manufacturing, really want your plant to run 100%, right? But it doesn't apply to maritime straight away. So there is a lot of naivety, if you like. And again, the good entrepreneurs are able to target those high value areas where you probably need predictive maintenance, such as critical equipment, right? Or high risk equipment. So that's an example of the status quo. It's there, but it takes a little bit of time to unpack it, right? And target areas where there is opportunity. Another one is people skills and human factors in particular. So the human element of it, okay? So for me, skills, digital skills in particular, are crucial to adoption and also a barrier, both of them, two sides of the same coin. And people with high digital skills are better buyers. They know what they're buying. They also know what good looks like. They have high expectation. They're pushing requests to the management. We want to have this. Why is everybody using cloud? Why are we not using cloud? Things like that. That comes with people with an appetite for more innovation. Very, very important. And they're drivers of change. But also human factors. Whenever technology is adopted in a very traditional sector, it disrupts the way people work, acceptance, people that don't know how to use it, they use it wrongly, they get demotivated, they fear about their job. So for me, skills and human factors are absolutely key things to consider when considering new technology. Are there barriers? Are there opportunities? Well, it depends whether one sees the glass half empty or half full, but it's really massive. Maybe another one is cost. You probably know this because you're talking to many people in the sector and you're an insider, but everybody in maritime says, there is no money into this. I'll never work. I'm not going to pay. It's like, and I'm saying, yeah, okay, fair enough. These are the features of the sector. But if I'm an entrepreneur and I hear this, or a tech company hearing this, I say, I'm not gonna go get anywhere near this sector, right? I mean, it costs X. They want to pay 1% of X. This doesn't work for me. So there is a mismatch between what people want to pay and what technology companies need to charge to be profitable. And this gap, I've never seen it so large as in maritime. Never. In my 30 years of life.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, there's a lot of things at play. Certainly, because it's a little bit transparent. I mean, it's not when you're trading a ship, pretty much even your competitors know that, okay, that ship's going to earn $18,000 a day, $22,000 a day, things like that, right? People are going to look at that and they're going to know that. So anything that erodes that cost is
Absolutely.
is
Absolutely.
transparent. Now, yeah, talking about a digital solution, depending on where it is, a lot of people they're starting to get their heads around it, because what they see, oh, you could have this digital solution for $50,000 a year. Oh my gosh. Well, divide it by 12 months, divide that by number of ships. And then all of a sudden it's not that at the end of the world. But
Precisely,
sometimes,
precisely, precisely.
sometimes it's hard
It's
to,
how it is positioned as well. It's a matter of language sometimes, and getting on the same page. I I have seen an example of a client that was doing a straight calculation of percentage of the probability of an accident times the cost of an accident.
mm-hmm,
You have a number, and that's your ceiling, right? That's how much you can pay for a solution to prevent that particular accident, right? And the numbers wouldn't stack up, right? The technology simply was not available at that cost. But when they started to look at the reputational damage of an accident, or safety,
mm-hmm,
or downtime, or other
mm-hmm,
aspects, then they start to say, well, hang on, this is bigger than just this calculation, right?
right,
So what we discovered by talking to clients is that these ROI calculations is a major barrier to adopting anything. But sometimes, going on the other side, the tech companies need to be smarter in the way they present the benefit of the technology. It's a two-way conversation.
right,
It's not a one-sided conversation where there
right,
is, for some stuff, there isn't an agreed pricing yet.
right.
Sometimes
Yeah.
is early, and prices need to be stabilized. So that's a major barrier that I think the technology sector and the maritime sector need to come together. This is what we do all the time. We see a big demand for low-cost solutions coming from other sectors, Chris. Okay?
Mm,
These other sectors have invested more and costs have gone down. There's more standardization. And I see a lot of clients asking for, where are those low-cost solutions that we hear about? Can we apply them to our sector? And so I see quite a lot of potentially cross-fertilization from other sectors coming into maritime, coming forward, simply because other sectors have been leading on lowering costs, maybe through high volume or other factors.
yeah, I just had a podcast that I dropped or in January, of a gentleman whose company, it's not digital per se, but it's a company that takes sodium bicarbonate and injects it into the smoke discharge
Mhm.
of ships, which then through chemistry with the sulfur changes it to something that's harmless. And they're also looking to do the same for CO2 to reduce emissions that way. And basically, it's what you said. It's taking a local, and he thought of this idea by driving by the smokestacks in the UK and realizing this is the same thing. How are they overcoming this challenge and trying to apply for ships? So this is a great example, although not digital, but still innovative, of using a non-maritime technology for the maritime space. And I think that, I think that leads into my next question: is this where you see some of the benefits going in the future? Like, do you see that this is where the business is going to have to go digitally to kind of improve what we do in the shipping
Well,
industry?
I am a great believer of this. It's not clear cut, but if you think about the billions being invested in the tech sector, with other verticals, could be manufacturing, could be transport, and so on. The billions and billions being invested. You don't see that level of money invested in technology for maritime. They're like orders of magnitudes apart. Therefore, the best tech is probably out there, not in maritime. Okay,
Mm.
so it's out there to be used. Now, however, when you talk to clients, they will say, unless you prove it to me that it works in maritime, it's not ready. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna wait, and I'm gonna wait for somebody to take the lead. Um, and so this might create a little bit of barrier or slowing down adoption, but eventually we'll get there because we work with a lot of leaders in the maritime sector that want to really push the boundaries of what technology can do. Okay, so it is our role to get that transfer. So it's a bit of a mix. solutions that have been proven a little in maritime already, so you know it works and needs scaling, but also solutions that generally come from outside and could really transform maritime. And so it's a combination of both, and something we specialize very much on in Safetytech Accelerator, which I think will be the right chemistry. If we say, no, solutions have to be born and bred, in maritime. So it should be like a sailor that one day decides to do AI, and then you have your maritime inbred startup. Yeah, that would be lovely to see, but it's not the whole story. It's not going to move as fast as it could with that particular model. So cross-fertilization and collaboration for me are key.
That kind of brings me into kind of another thought here, and that is, if you are somebody getting into the industry, whether it's from your established business professional like yourself, who's kind of coming from the outside, what is Lloyd Registers, as you mentioned earlier, or maybe a student thinking, hey, I heard a lot about the maritime industry and tech and maritime industry, but I'm on the tech side of things. Is it a place for me? What would you say to kind of those type of people? Because I always think it's interesting, because I think maritime gets kind of the only time you ever hear about maritime, if you think about it, especially our experience collectively as a world, as a human race, and I'm being serious, is when something goes really bad, whether it's a ship getting stuck in the canal like it did, and basically stopping global traffic for a significant percentage of the world, or supply chain interruptions, especially in the US and to a lesser extent in parts of Europe, but certainly in the US, there was panic because you couldn't get toilet paper at Walmart, and that was linked to supply chain. Tell me, so we have a little bit of a bad rep, but kind of on this underlying side is people realize how connected we all are, and the backbone of it is maritime. Why should somebody join kind of our cadre of people?
It's a great question. So I suppose I've been working close to the maritime sector for 7 years now, and Safetytech Accelerator is also working with other sectors, but we do a lot in maritime, right? And I've been hiring people recently from outside the sector. We have been growing recently, Safetytech Accelerator. So I have to play this story to hire talent into my team every time, because it's a very tight labor market, as you know. Talent is difficult to get, and we need to sell, basically, coming to work in this sector. So I can play back my learning, actually. How did I get interested in the sector and so on? And so, as I said, my first contact with maritime was a lot of Googling. I was like, what is this? It's a trumpet party. It's like, oh my God, okay. But I had the privilege of working with many talented insiders. So I've been learning every day something new, basically, working with maritime people. But then, taking a step back, I'm thinking about why, I enjoyed so much working on the digital innovation practice and what I do now. So there are very few sectors where you have literally billion-dollar, incredibly massive, moving, complex industrial assets, right? That travel across the world, right? Biggest ever things built by humans in some cases, right? They're pivotal to world trade. And they're part of a very complex distribution chain. The complexity is like mind-blowing. They operate in dangerous and hazardous conditions 24/7, with a lot of people at risk. We want to keep them safe, and with a lot of room for improvement. So where are sectors like this? It's like, wow, it's like a dream. You have a documentary talking about big moving things, complex, and you'll have one of those. So if you're an engineer or somebody doing digital transformation and so on, maybe I'm biased, but it's inherently quite attractive, the complexity and so forth. That said, though, I recognize that I'm privileged, right? I work in innovation. I'm working from my desk. I'm not on a ship, and so forth. So it's not as simple as that, though. It really depends on the role. For engineers, innovation people, I realize, but the sector has to do quite a lot to be more attractive, though, okay? In my view. For people like me, technologists and so on, there's quite a lot of work to do there to signal that the sector is exciting, to signal that the sector is a great career move. If you're a digital professional, there is so much to choose from. High growth, high money sectors. I don't know, transport, healthcare. You can go in a lot of places if you're digital. It's very horizontal. Why choosing maritime? That's a big question. And obviously, we know the sector has to do more for other roles, crews. We have, welfare, pay, and condition, other things that well known. Okay, so we need to distinguish what type of roles we're trying to attract. But in conclusion for this, I now know, realize, and kind of feel it why the sector attracts so much romanticism to it, right? You mentioned Marco Polo, still. So I think people that are in the sector are incredibly passionate about it, loyal, and it's beautiful to see. Really, I haven't seen it, perhaps apart from healthcare, where it's like a mission in life. I haven't seen it in a lot of other places, to be honest. Okay, and it's beautiful to see something I learned and I'm cherishing now to work with many, many talented people. So there's a lot to give to somebody wanting to come into the sector, but a lot of room for improvement to be more attractive. Okay, and it's basically to wear a bow tie, the sector, and go on a party well dressed. At the moment, it's a bit scruffy. Okay.
Oh, but it's funny, but you say that, and I think all the things that you say I agree with, but I also think there's one thing, and that I find, and certainly coming from the kind of commercial operational side, less on the engineering side, but innovative, I guess now a little more, is the relationships.
Yes.
Right. And you get to have this window into this giant world of commerce, of people, cross-cultural. I think that was the thing that attracted me to it, is that it's like, wow, like you could go to sea. I went to sea, but even, this whole thing is linked to everything that is done, everything. And I think that is, and I think that, you kind of touch upon this, not only, equity in welfare and things like that, but certainly getting more diverse workforce is key to our industry. And I'm hoping that through digitization, through roles that maybe attract younger folks and folks that wouldn't have had been normally attracted to the maritime space, we start to diversify a little bit. I'm a big proponent of that, and I think I think that digital tools and technology can help. So yeah, I encourage it. I do believe it's passionate. I think healthcare, education, certainly those are life callings. And I think what happens is people stumble into maritime and go, yeah, this is for me and I'm never leaving. So
yeah, you might be right there. I couldn't agree more. Yes. So great. I mean, to be honest, it's a great community. It's a great community, really.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I think it's welcoming. Someone like who's an outsider who can come in, and most people are pretty welcoming to it, right? There's not like, oh, this, why should we deal? Maurizio, he doesn't know anything. I mean, he's not a shipping guy. And maybe you get a little bit of that from here to there, but certainly, I see those, like you said, those barriers coming down. As we start to wrap up this great conversation, thank you again. What we talked about books. Are you being a well-read PhD, a man of many talents, an education and background? What are you reading? Or every now and again, I get one of my guests will say, "Well, I'm actually writing a book." Are you doing either of those?
Writing, I'm considering. I wish I had the time. I think I'll leave it for my hopefully early retirement at some point. But no, I'm reading. I'm a relentless reader of current news, news feeds and magazines and so on. The Economist, The New Scientist, and the Financial Times are my favorites. I have known to spend weekends reading them, front to back. However, I do try to have one or two books that I'm reading in parallel, so just to keep that going at any given time. At the moment, I'm reading a very almost disturbing book. It's called The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. And the book is about the climate emergency, okay? And it's very provocative. It talks about a new agency that has been set up by the United Nations called the Ministry for the Future. And the role of the agency, which has got a massive budget, is to take care of people that have not been born yet. That's why it's called Ministry of the Future. So the I guess the provocation there is that so much is about the now, but not about my children, my children's children, or 3 generations from now. What is the Earth going to be like? So the Ministry for the Future has been set up to take care of future generations. That's the only mission. Almost doesn't matter what's happening now. Very provocative, and it's very well articulated. And then you discover that this agency is funding the same problems as everyone is funding now. The vested interest, the resistance of all of us. We keep flying, we keep doing this, and then it's very difficult to change direction on the climate. And then the agency decides to do some black ops, so using unconventional methods to drive change. Obviously, it's fiction, but it's really thought-provoking because it's touching on many real aspects, real challenges in facing climate change at the moment. And I'm right there now with the black ops, so I'll let you know how it goes when I finish it. But very thought-provoking, I will say.
That sounds like a really good one. We've had a few people recently talk a little bit about some nonfiction. We had a lot of people talk about fiction, and kind of sorry, that not yours is fiction, and we had a lot of people talk about nonfiction. So that actually sounds pretty interesting as well. I mentioned before, I just got done reading a book, which a couple of guests have mentioned, this book about hijacked ship, dead in the water. I've read that recently, and that was quite good. It's a true story. It gives a really good view, especially for people coming into the industry, a bit about our industry. Although it's a little bit unsavory in some things, it's certainly eye-opening to the complexities of the industry. Well, Maurizio, as we wrap up here, I want to thank you for your time. I know you're busy. You're pushing out Accelerator, you're pushing out new tech, and trying to get things done. So I appreciate you taking some time and sitting down with us and chatting today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Chris, for having me.
That's the voice of Maurizio Pilu, today's guest on the podcast. We find out how his accelerator was born from an internal program at Lloyd's Register. And what is probably the most interesting thing is an in-depth look at the major barriers to digital transformation in our space. Of course, don't forget to follow. That's the plus button on the top of the podcast. This will allow you to be notified when new episodes are dropped. Of course, if you like what you hear, add a 5-star review and a few nice words. And please tell your friends about the podcast. The more listeners, the better. Thanks for listening to the podcast. And now on to the show.